thank you all for joining Vue Meetup today under JavaScript and Friends. We have Rob with us. Rob will be speaking about Vue.js and TypeScript, and the title is also somewhat interesting, and we hope the talk will also be yummy. So, Rob, without wasting too much time, it is all yours.
Very nice. Let me dig in and make it good. I will share my screen. Let's share this screen. I guess it helps if I push the share button. Share. There we go. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Very nice. So we're here to talk about Vue and TypeScript. Oh, oops, TypeScript. I'm going to take that note and go fix that. That is funny. We're going to talk about Vue and TypeScript working together like peanut butter and jelly. What's really cool about Vue is it's a really awesome front-end framework. And what's really awesome about TypeScript is it helps us catch stuff where we otherwise might make typos. So the two of them working together works really, really well. So let's dig in. Here's the part where I tell you I am definitely going to post the slides on my site tonight. You're going to check tonight, tomorrow, next week, next month. In about 3 months, you'll get tired of waiting for me to post them. In about 6 months, you'll email me and say, hey, can you post the slides? And I'll reply promptly in about 9 months and say, yeah, I'll definitely post them tonight. And yeah, I've been that guy chasing the presenter and it hasn't worked for me, which is why you can go to robrich.org right now, click on presentations. And here's the presentation. It is online right now at robrich.org. You can click through to the slides and see the slides that we're going to look at today. You can also click through to the code, and the code is online right now as well. It looks like I spelled TypeScript correctly there. So Vue and TypeScript, the code and the slides are online right now. While you're here on robrich.org, click on About Me, and you'll see some of the things that I've done recently. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I'm a friend of Redgate. AZ GiveCamp is really cool. AZ GiveCamp brings volunteer developers together with charities who otherwise couldn't afford software services. We start building software for them Friday after work. Sunday afternoon, we deliver that completed software back to the charities, and Monday morning, we jump back into work. It is so much fun. Sleep is optional, caffeine provided. If you're in Phoenix, come join us for the next AZ GiveCamp. Or if you'd like a GiveCamp here in Columbus or wherever you are, hit me up on email or Twitter, and let's get philanthropy installed in your area as well. Some of the other things that I've done, I worked as a core contributor on Gulp in version 2 and version 3. So I helped shape the surface area of that library. Sorry. And one of the things that I'm particularly proud of is I replied to a .NET Rocks podcast episode. They read my comment on the air, and they sent me a mug. Woohoo! So there's my claim to fame, my coveted .NET Rocks mug. It is so cool. So let's dig into Vue and TypeScript. This is definitely not an intro to Vue talk or an intro to TypeScript talk, but in case these are new, let's quickly level set and dig into what are these two things. Vue. Vue is a SPA framework like Angular or React. Vue focuses on developer productivity and easy learning. They specifically try to keep the concept count down so that there isn't a whole lot to learn. It's just really easy to get started. Whether you want to just grab a script and stick it in and build up a micro framework, micro front end, or whether you're looking to build a full-scale front-end application, that's really what Vue is focused on, is developer productivity. But as we look at React, Vue, and Angular, there really isn't a wrong choice here. If you've chosen and you've chosen differently than I, then that's totally fine, and I completely support it. React, Vue, and Angular, they all work on components. They all have a virtual DOM. They all have a CLI that allows you to scaffold and start up a project really quickly. They all have Babel and Webpack to transpile and bundle your content. They all output HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to the browser. And they all have a rich ecosystem of plugins and components. So whichever one you choose, you can be successful in building a fast, front-end, thick client application in the browser. There really is no wrong choice here. Looking at them, how do I think about React, Vue, and Angular? Angular requires TypeScript. Angular is really built for tooling. It's built to allow IntelliSense and tools to help you with that. And that's really cool. If you really like that mechanism, if you're coming from C#, maybe Angular is a good fit. React requires JSX. JSX mixes HTML and JavaScript in one file. And so if you like that methodology, if you don't like the barrier between HTML and JavaScript, then React might be a really good choice. Vue has single file components. And in single file components, you can have the CSS, the JavaScript, and the HTML all in one file, all doing the things that they do best in the areas where they excel. So I don't have to think in JavaScript as I'm doing my HTML. I can think in HTML, but they're still bundled in one file, which is really helpful. We'll dig into single file components. But again, you really can't go wrong here. So if you have a favorite here, then definitely jump in. React, Vue, and Angular. My completely biased opinion. Angular is built for tooling. React is built for Facebook, and Vue is built for developers. If you want to dig in, grab these slides from robrich.org and click into any of these blue links and you can see more details. Here's a more detailed comparison of Angular, React, and Vue. So creating a new Vue app. I'll come to this CLI and where is it? There it is. And I'll say Vue create my app. Once I do that, I spin up the Vue CLI and it will start to interview me to understand what my requirements are. In this case, I'm going to say I'm going to manually select features. And now I can pick the features. Do I want to choose the Vue version? Yes, I do. I'll use Babel. I'll also use TypeScript. I'll create a progressive web app. Yeah, I'll include Vue Router. I'll include the Flux Store Vuex. I can include CSS preprocessors like Sass or Less. I can grab a linter and a formatter. Unit testing, I can pull in Jest or Mocha. End-to-end testing, I can pull in Cypress or Nightwatch. And then once I go through, it will start to interview me about each of those features. Yeah, I'll use Vue version 2. No, I don't want class style components. Do I want to use Babel and TypeScript together? Yes, I do. Do I want history mode for the router? Yes, I do. And I can wander through each of these prompts, picking the exact features for my Vue application. And once I'm done, then I'll get an app. I'll get a bunch of files scaffolded out. It'll npm install in there, and I can cd into that directory and start digging into my Vue app. So getting started with Vue is super simple. Vue create my app, fill in all the prompts with the answers that make sense to you. Npm install in that directory and npm run serve. So if I do that, I'll come in here to this one, npm run serve, and now I can go to localhost 8080, and I can take a look at the app that we've built. Now this is the app that we've built here. It has a home page and it has an about page. We can see that we're navigating between things, but we're doing this on the client side with client-side routes. We're not hitting the server differently. That's cool. We've got an app. So that was Vue, and a really lightning fast intro to Vue. We're going to dig a lot deeper into Vue. Next, let's kind of do a level set on TypeScript. What is TypeScript? Why would I include TypeScript? Why would I not include TypeScript? TypeScript is a really great library to say, Did I call it correctly? Let's take a look at this code. I'm calling some critical function. I'm passing in a customer, an invoice, a date. What is this true thing? Why do I have to have it in curly braces? Or is that a typo? And then I pass in false. What's false? Now I have 2 commas. Was that a typo? It really looks like it ought to be, but if I remove it, am I going to break things? I don't know. I don't know if I called it correctly. That's where TypeScript comes in. Now we may start to fix this a little bit by constructing an object so that we'll basically have named parameters in here. By doing the curly brace on both sides, I formed an object with named parameters, and I can now pass in only those things. So now I know I'm passing in a customer, an invoice, a date, and a config. That's cool in being able to highlight the different parameters that I'm passing in, but is customer an object? Should it be a Boolean? Those are things that I still don't know yet. And that's where TypeScript comes in. Here's a great example that I hit all the time. So when I'm using jQuery, should I do the selection and then the method, or should I do the dollar and then the method? I don't know how many times I've done this typo where I pick something and then I do .ajax on that thing. No, that's not really what I want. I probably want to do $.foo.click, and when they click it, then I'll call $.ajax. This is where TypeScript can go, I don't think you meant what you think you meant. Thank you for joining the meetup. We'll be doing QA at the end. If you do have a question all the way through, though, definitely interrupt me and we can dig into your question as we need to. So TypeScript. TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. All valid JavaScript is valid TypeScript by definition. TypeScript then adds optional hints that identify the types of things. Now, these are optional. They're not required. And if we don't add them, it still works fine. This is all about the design time experience. TypeScript is only as we're building the code. As we transpile the code into JavaScript, what runs in the browser is JavaScript. We're not running TypeScript in the browser, we're running JavaScript. So if I open up the F12 developer tools and I start debugging my app, that code will be JavaScript. The TypeScript is only at design time. And with that TypeScript, I get the type hints and I get to understand, did I call that correctly? Is this the intent of the developer that built that function? With TypeScript, it's kind of like Babel and Webpack. I get to use new JavaScript features sooner. So for example, the null coalescing operator, we had the double pipes, but now we have the double question mark. Double pipes would say, if it was falsy, then do it. The double question marks is if it's null or undefined. So if we had a value that was false and intentionally false, or 0 or an empty array, now we don't overwrite that with our default. That's really cool. Similar with optional chaining. Optional chaining came to TypeScript before it came to browsers. And so by using TypeScript, we can leverage this feature sooner too. The things that are in late stages inside of the TCM, that's not it, the JavaScript standards committee, as they move through the phases, TypeScript will make sure that its version is compatible with any changes that they make. But it's really cool to be able to leverage those new features sooner. I love TypeScript. So TypeScript will validate that the types match, but TypeScript will not validate your logic. If you're using TypeScript as your one and only unit test, then TypeScript probably isn't helping and you may not want to use TypeScript. Its job is to validate the types, not to validate your business logic. You still need unit tests around your TypeScript code. So how do we get started with TypeScript? Well, the first step is we will rename the file from .js to .ts. Next up, we can choose to do optional type hints. So in the code sample above, we pass in a name and we return hello plus name. What type is name? Is it a string? Is it a number? Is it a date? In the bottom code, we can say with this colon string, I'm passing in a string and I expect you to pass me a string. And I'm going to return a string with this colon string here at the end. Here's that return type colon string, and here's the colon string input type. Now anyone calling this function knows specifically what they need to pass. They need to pass a string. And if they don't pass a string, then the IDE will help with the red squiggles underneath it. That's really cool. Here's another example. In the top code, we have this const x. We have A is B and C is D. Is that code right? I don't know. Let's move this over to TypeScript. We would start by renaming the file to .ts. And then down here at the bottom, we'll take a look at how we might add optional type hints. We're going to start out creating a types.ts file, and we're going to export an interface. And this interface just says, what fields should I expect in this object? Now, casting into an interface doesn't remove fields or trim the object or even create fields. It just validates that the object has all of these fields. Okay, so I've created this customer info. I've specified that A is a string, C is a number, and O is a string, but it's optional. See this question mark right here? It is an optional property. I don't need to specify an O. But we're already learning more about this. It's a customer. That's cool. We're making our intention clear. Now I'm going to import customer info from that other file, and I will say const x colon, and I'll give it some type information, in this case, customer info. And now I can say that the object that I'm building should match that interface. So A is B and C is D. I'm going to get red squiggles here on D because D is not a number. D is a string. It went and matched it to this interface and it says, nope, I expected that to be a number. And so my IDE will help me fix it. Well, what runs in the browser is still JavaScript. So as this gets transpiled from TypeScript to JavaScript, this import gets removed. Our production runtime is not bigger because of our design time type hints. These are only design time things. In my runtime experience, nothing from this types file will come into play. All of this type information will be gone, and I'll be able to dig into only those pieces that are specific to my JavaScript code. TypeScript is only a design time helper. So often TypeScript can figure out the types itself, but here's a pro tip. Whenever you can specify the types, you're making your intention clear. You're better communicating with your fellow developers. It's not uncommon for me to document a little piece of code and then come back through and I've forgotten what I built a week ago or a month ago. And so those hints help me to understand what the previous developer built. The more that we can leave clues for ourselves, the more we can build robust and enterprise-grade software. It's really great to have these design time hints so that we can kind of explain what we meant in that code. So that's Vue and TypeScript, just level setting really quick. Any questions on either Vue or TypeScript before we dive into some code, adding them together? Awesome. Well, we saw how Vue really focused on developer productivity. We saw how TypeScript focused on developer productivity as well and making our intent clear. So let's add Vue and TypeScript together. Now, I created this application just with the Vue CLI. And what we see in this app is just the normal things. I can see I have my main.ts, just like any normal Vue app. And this will pop pop open my app.vue. Here in my app.vue, I'm using Vue router, so I have these two links, and then I have router view, the spot where each page should be. Okay, so I pop open those pages. Here's home.vue, and so we can see that home.vue will pull in this hello world component. Popping open components, here's that hello world component. So far, it looks like a regular Vue app. That's cool. There's one interesting thing right here. It says lang equals TS, TypeScript. This is a TypeScript app. In fact, all of the files that we've been looking through so far are TypeScript files. app.vue, hello world.vue, lang equals TS. We're going to compile them with TypeScript. That's perfect. Here's our TS config that tells us how we're doing that TypeScript compilation. And for the most part, I just took the file that the Vue CLA gave me and ran it through. That's cool. In our source code, which you can grab from robrich.org, we have each of these steps. And so that was step 0, where I just created the app with the Vue CLI. Here in step 1, let's do a little bit more to say, well, I've got, I just want to clean up some of the ESLint errors. I prefer semicolons. So I just put in all of the semicolons, like right here. Now we've got our app. Next, I want to add Vuetify. Vuetify is a really cool library that has lots of controls that I can use. So for example, I can use a whole bunch of UI components. It has, much like Bootstrap, it has components that style things, but this uses material design. It's a really cool library with lots of intricate details, but it was not built with TypeScript in mind. We hit our first challenge. How do we take Vue and TypeScript? Or said better, how do we include a JavaScript library in a TypeScript application? Well, first step, I'm going to say Vue create my app. I've already done that. And then I'm going to say Vue add Vuetify. That will add the Vuetify app into, or add the Vuetify, add the Vuetify details into my app. Okay, so I've done that. And now if we come in here, we see Vuetify. I'm importing Vuetify from my plugins Vuetify. Here's my plugin, and here's Vuetify. But I'm getting red squiggles all over the place. TypeScript knows nothing about what Vuetify is. It's a JavaScript library, not a TypeScript library. Now what's interesting is once I transpile my code, we can see that my app rebuilt itself. Oh, it's in the middle of rebuilding itself. And the JavaScript piece will work just fine. The TypeScript piece is the part with the issue because TypeScript doesn't know how the Vuetify library works. Let's give it a sec to finish up this transpile. There we go. We've got a lot of errors here in the console, but if I fire up my application, I can see we've still got our Vue app. Oh, it is going to fail. That's interesting. Okay, so how do I get started with Vue? Well, I found this GitHub issue where it says, well, if you just change this to include Vuetify/types and add the Vuetify types here, then it will work. Okay, let's go add those. So I'm going to step into number 3. And now we've got those types in place. If I pop open my tslint.json, nope, my tsconfig, then we see that we've got the Vuetify types here, we've got the Vuetify types here, and now when I go pop open the Vuetify plugin, then TypeScript is happy. It knows how this works. That's cool. Though Vuetify really didn't support types when it was first created, they've shimmed in some types to make it possible for us to do stuff. As the app rebuilds, we can see that, oh, is it going to rebuild? Or do I need to restart my CLI? Nope, I'm going to restart my CLI. Okay. As it builds now, we'll see that we do get this Vuetify app, and we get the TypeScript support for it. Give it a little bit to build. The fun of trying to do npm install or webpack build while streaming. It gets to be a little bit intense. I also love how as it discovers more modules, both numbers pop up. So it's like Microsoft Math, where I'm 80% there, and then I'm 60% there, and then I work my way back up. But it looks like we got it. 700, 750, almost there, almost there. Now, Vue's serve command is really elegant in that it watches all of the commands in my project, but it doesn't watch my node modules, which is why it kind of failed there. Okay, so back into our project. Now we have the Vuetify library. It's blue instead of green. We have buttons that are styled nicely. This is pretty cool. We've got Vuetify. Okay. So now let's go build a component. I want to build a counter component. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say for, and Vue is going to kick off and rebuild the things. Perfect. Let's take a look at this counter component. So I have here in my home, I created this new playground page where I can just kind of put in my components as I'm playing with them. I do need to come in here into router and add the playground in my router. I'm using lazy loading here. That is so cool. So now here in my playground, we do have a reference to counter. I've pulled in my counter component here and referenced it in my Vue app here. So let's take a look at that counter component. Now we get to see the single file components here, which is really cool. Here's the template, the HTML part. Here's the JavaScript, in this case, TypeScript, and that can be in its own section. And here's the CSS styles. And what's really cool, they're scoped to this component. So they won't leak out into higher components higher up in the tree. And so that can be really, really cool. So here's our counter component. Now we'll use the handlebars curly braces to output this variable. And then I want to click to add one or click to remove one. Here in my application, we have two methods, add and remove, or add and subtract, where I'm adding one and then I'm subtracting one. Now I am choosing to emit an event, which is really cool. From this counter component, we get this event coming back to our parent component, and I can say count changed. Now this count changed event will just grab this count changed and set it into this count variable in my parent. So popping open that app, let's go to Playground, and we can see this counter component. And not only do we have the changes here in our component, but we've also propagated those changes outside the component to the parent component as well. I can add and remove pieces. That's cool. Now, what's interesting here is here in our component, this is of number, and we're incrementing and decrementing. So we're getting the TypeScript type helpers here, which is really, really cool. I'm emitting that count. So this count is a number. But I made a typo here in my parent component. Here, I said this count is a string. Here in my count changed event, I assumed that this count would be a string and I would set it into my parent variable. And so, yeah, I expect this to be a string. Well, when this gets transpiled into JavaScript and run in the browser, what gets passed in is a number. In JavaScript, all of the TypeScript weirdness is gone. And so in JavaScript, everything works fine. We can see that my app just works great. I can add and remove, and what's coming into my child component is a number. It's unfortunate that we don't get validation between components with this TypeScript mechanism, but that's one place where we'll need to be careful. I've heard that in Vue 3, this gets better, that we might get type helping or type validation between components, and that would be wonderful. But here's another place where this was designed in JavaScript, and so now in TypeScript land, we don't quite get all of the validation that we need. That's okay. So let's add some more components. Actually, any questions so far on the TypeScript that we've done so far? So now I built some more components. Here in my playground, I have my counter, I have an icon playground, I have a navigator. Icon playground is a great way to do some interesting things with font awesome. So I have V-icon. This is a Vuetify component where I can just specify the font awesome icon labels and it will be able to display. Navigator, I'm doing some interesting things to check if I can do links using Vue Router, both just as URLs or programmatically. So I'll click the navigate button and then the navigate will call this .router.push. So if I pop open that page, now we've got font awesome. Hey, Vue, that's cool. The font awesome icons are working great. And I can navigate either with a link or programmatically. That's cool. Well, one of the things that we noticed is because we're using Vue with TypeScript, we have this $router and it's working just fine. Vue knows that we're pulling in the Vue router, and Vue router will put a $router on our Vue object. And so we don't need to do anything weird to get rid of squiggles here. Vue knows about this component. That's cool. So next, I want to do something interesting. I was playing here with Vuetify, and I wandered through my components, and I really like this forms component. This forms component is kind of cool. I can enter my name. I can enter my email. If I enter my email incorrectly, it'll give me this cool validation. I can submit the form, but I can't submit the form until I fill it in. So there's my email. I can pick an item. I'll agree. And now I can click the validate button. That's cool. I like how this form works. I can come in here to the code. Let me go grab all that template content. I'll come in here to the script and grab that. Let's set that in place. I'm going to go grab step 6. And I've got the form. So straight away, it's really cool. I now have my form component where I've created this form and I have all of the fields. I've got all of the validation functions. I have my component where I'm mapping all of that data into place. And if I power up this form, oh, I bet I'm racing the compiler. Oh, what's this .validate function? What's this .validate function? TypeScript knows nothing about this form control. It says, well, it's either a view or an element or a view array or an element array. That doesn't have a validate function. It doesn't have a reset function. It doesn't have a reset validation. Yeah, you're right. Well, HTML form does. So how can we do this? Let's come in here and let's say computed. And here inside the computed section, I'm going to create a thing called form. And now I'm going to return this $refs.form as HTML form. HTML form element. Now, HTML form element together with some other things. Now, if I say instead of this.refs.form, this.form has a validate method. Ooh, that's cool. I can give it some type hints here. HTML form element. Yeah, spelling it right helps. HTML form element. Okay, so now validate works. Reset works. Reset validation works. We just hit our next tip for being able to include JavaScript libraries inside of a TypeScript project. I can create a computed element that casts my thing into the interface that I expect it to be. Now, the interesting thing about as in TypeScript is it doesn't validate that this thing is what I expect it to be. What I'm saying is, I know, but it is. It's kind of a brute force technique. But what we did here is we created this computed element. We could also say create a different component and expose these things, but we're just kind of shimming it into a type that exists. That's cool. So let's go grab step 7. Step 7. And there's that mechanism for being able to build this. Now, in this case, vform. I built a vform thing right here. And so I put that in types. That might be a little bit gentler way to do this rather than just casting it. Here inside types, I have this vform thing. So I'm saying, let's export a type. It is an HTML form element, and it's a component, and it has these 3 methods that happen to have this signature. So that's really cool. I'm going to pull in that type from this external file. I'm going to cast my thing as a vform, and now all of the places that need it can use that vform interface to vform type rather to validate that all of these methods are as we expect. That's great. Now, presuming I didn't erase the compiler here, we now have a form. So here's that form. I can fill in my name. I can fill in my email. If I don't fill them in, I'll get errors. Let me pick a thing. Do I agree? And once I've filled in the form correctly, now the submit button lights up. I can submit it and everything is great. I've still got this great binding where I say form is valid. So if I don't enter a valid email address, the form isn't valid, and that's what I'm using to disable the submit button. Cool. That was our next tip of creating a type and being able to shim that content into type with the as keyword. Okay. So the next thing that I want to do is I'm noticing that this counter component is cute and all, but it always starts with 0. I really don't want it to start with 0. I want it to start with a random number, somewhere between, I don't know, 0 and 100. There's this really cool Lodash function that I like. So I went to the Lodash docs, I searched for random, and here's that random function. And I can say, give it a lower and an upper, and it will return me some random number. Okay, so I want to come here into my counter component. And here in my counter component, rather than starting with 0, I want to start with random from 0 to 100. Well, yeah, let me import random from Lodash. Import. Okay. Lodash was a library built in JavaScript. It was not built with TypeScript in mind. So we get the red squiggles. Now, the interesting thing here is we'll get the red squiggles, but we can see that it built successfully. We can see that, oh, it didn't build successfully. We can refresh it and we will get it to work as we expect. See, it's got a 36. I'll refresh again and we've got a 92. The JavaScript is running, but we got some TypeScript errors. It doesn't know what Lodash is. So how can we teach it what Lodash is? Well, let's come in here and I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to say this is lodash.d.ts. Now, this is a TypeScript declaration file. Here, I'm going to say this is declare module Lodash. This is what I want the Lodash library to look like. I want the Lodash library to have a function called random, and it's going to take in a min that is a number, a max that is a number, and it's going to return a number. Okay, I've built this declaration of what that module should be. Back here in my counter component, I can come in and I can say, oh, okay. Oh, here's the part where Vue is going to get a little grumpy. So let me come in here. Sometimes it takes restarting VS Code for it to find those new type declaration files. But what's cool here is now it knows what Lodash is. I no longer get the red squiggles for Lodash. And in fact, when I said it has a random function, now it even knows what random is. That's cool. And it knows that it needs to pass in two numbers. So if I pass in foo here, then I'll get the red squiggles saying, hey, that's not how this random function works. Now that was interesting. I did some work to tell it how the Lodash module works. But what's interesting here is that I didn't import that .d.ts file. It merely needs to be in my project. Once I've declared that lodash.d.ts file, I've explained how the Lodash library is supposed to work. There, we get our red squiggles. It's not a string, it's a number. If I only pass in one number, it goes, hey, you need to pass in another one. I'll pass in both of them, and now it's fine. Now, we did this for one of the Lodash functions, but there's a few. So it may take a while to be able to build up all of the details about all of the Lodash functions in this library. That's a lot of work. Now we can come here to definitely typed, and we can take a look at the type declarations that the community has built. Now this definitely typed library is humongous. Sorry, we had to truncate this directory at 1,000 files. There are 6,465 entries omitted, meaning there's nearly 7,500 folders of all of these libraries in this definitely typed library. Now what's really cool is each of these are built into an NPM package inside the types namespace. So I go to @type/Lodash, and if I were to npm install this package, I would get type declarations for the entirety of Lodash generated by the community. That's really cool. Okay, so if I npm install this package, I'm going to save dev, not save. I'm going to save dev this package. It's only a dev dependency. And now I'll get type declarations for the entirety of Lodash. That is really cool. So I can come in here and I can delete my lodash.d.ts, and we can grab that library. So we just saw two new techniques for including JavaScript libraries inside of TypeScript projects. I can craft a type declaration file, or I can try to grab a type declaration file from definitely typed. Two great strategies there. So let's go grab step 8, which I believe is me adding the Yep. And step 9 is me creating the low-dash type declaration file. And so let's see if I change my mind. Low-dash type declaration file. Oh, spelling it correctly is helpful. So let me go delete the incorrectly named file. Okay. So now I've got type declarations, and now my counter works and all the things work. Okay. So I'm having fun with this pulling in other components piece. I'm going to go look for some more components. Let's come in here, not that. Let's come in here, and I am Googling for some new stuff. And I land here on Vue Awesome. If ever you're looking for a thing, Googling that thing and awesome often gets you to a repo like this with a curated list of really awesome things. So here's a bunch of projects using it. Here's a bunch of components. And I'm after a parallax library. Now, what's interesting, a table, a notification, a loader, tooltip, these are only the categories of components. As we dig deeper into the specific components, there are a lot of them. Here's all the libraries. And what's really cool is they're starting to notate when they have Vue 3 support, which is really, really cool. So I'm going to cruise down to the parallax section, and I pick this Vue Parallax JS library. Now, this Vue Parallax JS library was definitely not crafted with TypeScript in mind, but that's okay. I just want to pull it in. So I'm going to go grab that library. And now here in my app, in my home view, I've created this parallax mechanism. In main.ts is when I pull it in. And so here's that Vue parallax library. We hit this when we pulled in Vuetify. We hit this when we pulled in Lodash. Let's use a different technique in this case. Now this Vue library, if I go look at the source code for this Vue library, we've got this parallax. We have this thing, takes in an OS, whatever OS is. Here's the prototype. Okay, so add. Oh, that's probably what we're going to do, because here in our code, we're actually pulling in, not that one, that one. We're pulling in this library and we're using it as a plugin. So Vue.use. Okay, so we're getting closer. Add. Well, we've taken an EL and a binding. I don't know what any of those are. Yeah. Export default. Ooh, this might be in. We're taking a Vue and an OS. I still don't know what an OS is, but I'm pretty sure I know what a Vue is. Okay, so building this type declaration file is going to be really hard. I don't. I don't want to do that. Okay, we can use TypeScript to generate a type declaration file as well. So here in this Stack Overflow example, it shows us exactly how to do that. TSC -- declaration some TypeScript file. Okay, so let's head out to the folder where that Vue Parallax library is. Here's that folder, and Vue parallax.js.js is the file that we want to copy, that we want to use. Okay, so I'm going to pop open node modules, and I'm going to go dig for Vue parallax.js, and I'm here inside the lib folder. And so the first step I'm going to do is every JavaScript file is valid TypeScript. I'm just going to duplicate it, and I'm going to change the suffix to .ts, the extension. Okay, so now I have a Vue parallax.ts. I still have the original JavaScript file, but now I also have a TypeScript file. That's cool. Back here in the Stack Overflow post, we can then say tsc -- declaration, that TypeScript file. Okay, tsc -- declaration Vue parallax.js.ts. Now that's going to generate for us a type declaration file. It may not be pretty, and it's probably not perfect, but it'll get us started. Yeah, there's a lot of errors in there. But from here, not that one. From here, I can now open up this .d.ts file and take a look at what they built. Okay, so I have this library and I have this install function. Right now, it takes in an any and returns a void. This probably needs to be a view. And so now I can start to tune this to match the expectations that I need. That's cool. By generating a type declaration file, I can get closer to the answer sooner. So let me go nuke those two so that VS Code won't get confused. And I will pull in the next piece, 11. So based on that type declaration file that we got from, am I in the wrong folder? That was a lot of things that I copied. Based on that type declaration file, I started building it out, and I ended up with this Vue parallax.d.ts. And this describes how that parallax library works. That's cool. Now that I've got that file in place, I can come back into my application. I bet I'm racing the compiler right now. Oh, maybe not. And now on the home page, we get this really cool parallax effect. See how this one on the left is moving slower than the one on the right? This library was definitely not built with TypeScript in mind, but I can still use it in TypeScript by building out this .d.ts file. So that was really cool. We got to see a lot of different strategies for how to include a JavaScript project in a TypeScript project, even if it didn't have any type definitions or any concept of TypeScript when it was built. Let's take a look at a list. And this is a good prioritized list. This is not the order that we saw the demos, but this can be a good checklist as you're looking for ways to include JavaScript in a TypeScript project. First step, use libraries built for TypeScript. Yeah, of course. But that's probably not why we choose a library. We choose a library because it does what we want it to do. So this isn't a deal breaker, but if you have two libraries where all else is indeed equal, grab the TypeScript one because it'll be easier to consume in TypeScript. Next up, look at Definitely Typed. Definitely Typed has type definitions for a lot of popular libraries. And so oftentimes I'll just say npm install @types/my-library. And if I find it, that's perfect. And if I don't, now I can continue down the list. Next up, handcraft a declaration file. We built a lodash.d.ts, and it's really not that hard. Create that d.ts file, restart VS Code, and now you can use the declaration that you built for that library. Generate a declaration file. If building the declaration file is too difficult, then we saw that we could use the TypeScript compiler not just to transpile TypeScript into JavaScript, but we could also use it to generate a type declaration file. It will inspect the TypeScript and start to get us close to it. It's probably not perfect, but it gets us started. So from there, we can use that to start to tune our type declaration file and really get it perfect. We also saw using the as keyword. Now, as is okay, but it doesn't validate that the source and the destination are the same or even compatible. It just says, just do it. We can cast it into this magic type called any, and any just means it's good. And so any probably isn't a great solution. You'll probably want to pick a solution higher up in this list. But if you just need to get it done, then you can just say it's an any, which basically tells TypeScript, quit poking at it. It's good enough. You can disable any using an ESLint rule. So if you're worried about developers starting to just cast everything as any and losing all of the benefits of TypeScript, then you can create that rule that will mark any as a compile error or warning. Similarly, you can put this comment on the line at ts-ignore. That'll say, hey, TypeScript, I'm having a lot of problems with this line. Just ignore it. We don't have to undo it like other ESLint rules. This only affects the next line. So we say ignore that next line, and it'll pretty much treat it like an any. Similar to any, we can disable ts-ignore using an ESLint rule so that if we're getting to the point where our code is behaving well enough, we can say, nope, we don't need that crutch anymore. Here's some strategies for getting JavaScript into TypeScript. Use TypeScript libraries, use definitely typed, craft declaration files, generate declaration files, use as, use any, and use ts-ignore. All of these techniques are great whether you're using Vue or React or Angular. These are techniques for pulling in JavaScript libraries into your TypeScript project. So when would I use Vue and TypeScript together? If I have a large or long-lived code base, I definitely want to grab TypeScript because it'll make my intention clear. TypeScript is great at being able to explain intent, and when my code lives longer than my memory, I definitely want to explain the intent. The developer following behind me may be me shortly after I've forgotten how it works, so explaining the intent is really cool. Now, TypeScript is a good first check, but it's not the only check. When would I not want to use TypeScript? Well, when I'm leaning on it too much. If you depend on lots of components or lots of libraries that don't have type definitions, either indefinitely typed or built into their project, then you're going to spend a lot of time crafting these type declaration files, and it might make more sense just to abandon TypeScript. For quick doodles, TypeScript may not be appropriate because, well, you may not have a TypeScript compiler option available. If you just want to dump a bunch of scripts in a page and make it work, then you definitely can't use TypeScript. But even for quick doodles, when I'm just wanting to spin up a quick project, I will probably avoid TypeScript. For non-CLI or non-compiled projects, if you've started with the CLI, you can pick TypeScript and it'll add all the things. It'll scaffold out your tsconfig, and that is amazing. But if you're just starting with a script in a page, you probably can't use TypeScript. And finally, if you're leaning on it too much, if you believe that the compile is the one and only test that you need, then TypeScript is going to give you a false sense of security. You still want to create lots of unit tests, even if you're in TypeScript. To that end, Jeff Fritz is on the Vue core contributors team, and he's created the Vue Enterprise boilerplate. At one point, the Enterprise boilerplate was built in TypeScript, and now it is not. He found that exact concern to be the case, that a lot of people were just leaning on the TypeScript compiler to do all of the testing, and that's not the case. So grab these slides from robrich.org, click through to this blue link, and you can dig into Jeff Fritz's thoughts on TypeScript with Vue. For me, I think Vue and TypeScript works really well together. I've found some strategies that allow me to include JavaScript libraries in my TypeScript code, and I can be really productive knowing that TypeScript is going to come behind me and validate that I haven't made just simple typos and type mismatches. I think Vue and TypeScript work really well, just like peanut butter and jelly. You can grab these slides at robrich.org, and you can tweet me at rob_rich if you're watching this video pre-recorded. For those who are here live, what are your questions?
Thanks, Rob. Thank you for giving us an overview about TypeScript and how you can generate the type declaration files. And I always admire your way of talk, where you just go live coding and run the show very well. Thank you for all the information.